Hello there, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Transfer Talk podcast. Not long until this transfer window closes, and this is the place, the best place for all the latest transfer news and analysis. My name is Dharmesh Sheth, and I'm joined by legend, friend, colleague. Not sure which one's top of the list there. ESPN Sam Tighe. You happy with that intro this week?
Very happy. A huge upgrade. I see my lawyers have been in touch and the legal threats did land last week to make sure that I got an appropriate introduction this week.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I was going to say it's probably more colleague than anything else, isn't it?
Friend first.
Friend.
Entertainer. Probably a boss third.
Colleague. Legend. In there somewhere. Okay. That was the first important question. The other one, there's been some blockbuster headlines this week, haven't there? About Cole Palmer and Manchester United. Liam Rosenior has said untouchable. Cole Palmer is untouchable. No one's untouchable, are they?
Probably not, no. And the way Chelsea run their business model, mass recruitment and then obviously flipping players on for profit. Occasionally they're going to stumble across a gem because it's a percentage game, and Cole Palmer has been one of those. Esteval looks like another one. But I don't think for a second that any Chelsea player is truly untouchable. What this means is start the bidding at 9 figures, please, because this is a £100 million player plus, and that's enough to scare just about everyone else off.
It could even be talking like mid-100s,
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Okay, look, let's get into it. Let's talk Chelsea. Let's stick with them for a minute. A position where nothing seems untouchable is centre-back. I think they've got 84 at the club and around the world as well. They've triggered a recall option on Aaron Anselmino from Borussia Dortmund. He didn't seem too happy about it. He was crying. I'm sure you've seen those pictures of him when he was saying goodbye to his Dortmund teammates. Have you been tracking him at Borussia Dortmund? What kind of player is he?
Yeah, he's not happy, and Dortmund fans aren't particularly happy either. They've really taken to him, and it's pretty impressive that he's managed to garner that much affection from about 550 minutes of football this season, because true to the form of a Chelsea defender, Anselmino has been quite injured this season and his campaign has been quite disrupted. So genuinely just a shade over 500 minutes in Bundesliga and Champions League football combined. It's not a lot to go on. So I think Chelsea are probably recalling him to take a really good look at him, because what he has put together for Dortmund has been really impressive. I watched them play against Bayer Leverkusen the other week and he was really, really good. So maybe they just want a closer look at him. They also brought Axel Disasi back in from the cold, back from the bomb squad, as we talked about last week. Clearly want to take a look at him. I think this is completely up in the air. Anselmino and Disasi in 4 days' time could be sent back out somewhere else. Yeah. We'll see. Or they might be integrated. Chelsea do have a bit of an injury situation at centre-back. It does look like they're going to need at least one player if Jeremy Jacquet is a no-go for this month.
We'll come to Jacquet in just a moment. Are either of those, in Disasi and Anselmino, good enough for what Chelsea need to do for the rest of this season?
Well, it's hard to say with Anselmino. What we've seen so far for a young player is really, really good. He loves to tackle, he's really physical, and he always seems to get his foot in and get the ball. And he's one of those players that always just seems to ends up in the radius of the ball, like a defender that really just understands how the bounce of the ball is going to go, has a natural nose for it. I don't think Disasi is good enough to play for Chelsea, to be honest. I think we have enough evidence for that. So if they want to roll the dice on Anselmino and see if he can maybe grow into the role, great. But Chelsea are up against it here to secure a top 5 spot, a Champions League spot, which needs to be the absolute cornerstone of what they're achieving. Like a bare minimum for Chelsea should be to get into those top 5 spots. So, Anselmino does feel like a bit of a risk in that respect. So I don't know where they're going to go with this.
You mentioned Jacquet there, Jeremy Jacquet from Rennes. It's our understanding that Chelsea is his preferred destination. I mean, that's part of the battle, I guess, but the hardest part is clearly trying to agree a fee between the two clubs. We are running out of time in this transfer window. Do you see a deal happening in the remaining time we have left? Because no doubt Rennes, if they were allow him to go, not only would want a huge fee for him, we're hearing £56 million, but they probably want a replacement as well in that time.
I mean, the longer time goes on, the more difficult this gets from the two angles, right? Because for Rennes, it's about maybe the price starts to tick up a little bit because it's more of an inconvenience for them the longer this drags on. And of course, they would need to go ahead and find another player to fit in, and they'd only have a small amount of time to do that. And of course, if teams know that Rennes have just been armed with 60 million euros, then whichever player they go after next, the price starts to go up. So it's a bit of a self-defeating strategy to keep it going and keep it on the ball for so long for Chelsea, which leads me to the realistic impression that this is the groundwork for a summer deal.
Yeah.
But we don't know. We never know with Chelsea. I mean, they've just recalled Anselmino, brought Disasi in from the cold, and they're considering Xhaka. That's 3 centre backs. I mean, what is the plan? Who knows?
Or cynics might say that they've brought these 2 players back, maybe to send a message to Rennes and saying, "Oh, well, okay, fine. We've got Anselmino.
Yeah.
We've got Disasi. We can just play them, unless you accept what we are offering."
Well, what if they're going to send Anselmino on loan to cover Xhaka? What if that was their solution? You don't have a lot of time for a centre back. Interesting. We had this really good one.
2.
Trust us, he's brilliant. 550 minutes for Borussia Dortmund this season. Loves to tackle. That guy on the podcast said it. Why don't you just take him for half a season? Just cover yourself off. Maybe that's it. Maybe it's 4D chess.
Yes, maybe. Listen, there are only a few days left. I'm sure we will be talking about Chelsea, as we always do, for the remainder of this window. But before we chat about a busy few days at Aston Villa, yes, all right, calm down, Sam. Let's discuss a transfer story that probably took fans of both clubs and fans of every other club a bit by surprise, and that was Liverpool's Andy Robertson, to Tottenham Hotspur. The current state of that deal is it's stalled, in inverted commas, as Roma search for a replacement for Kostas Tsimikas, because if the Robertson deal was to happen, Liverpool would want to bring back Tsimikas from his loan at Roma to cover for Milos Kerkez. That would then leave a hole for Roma. And if they try and get someone, it might leave a hole for someone. It's a long chain. Anyway, but if Robertson was to leave, we've been saying in previous podcasts about what it will take to fix Tottenham Hotspur's issues this season. I don't think one signing like that would, but is the left-back area a primary area where they need to improve? And is he the ideal player to sort that area?
I mean, I think like the primary areas of concern for Spurs, and that the quickest fixes you can find would be having a fit and available scoring striker, which they've for one reason or another have never managed to put all 3 of those words together this season. They've had loads of churn up front with loads of different injury problems. Solanke, Richarlison and Kolomawani. I think he's a good player, but he hasn't scored many goals at all. So that would be the number 1. Scoring goals always helps. And the number 2 would be, and I always bring it back to this ability to move the ball through midfield and how Spurs can't do it. Their cast of midfielders are not a progressive passing cast. And despite this issue, they just keep adding tacklers and runners to the position group, not players who can thread a ball through. So in that respect, Robertson doesn't really help because he's a left back. What I will say is, Ben Davies has broken his ankle. Porro is out for 4 weeks. So they're down to the extremely injury-prone Destiny Udogie and Jed Spence. And look, they're still in the Champions League. Looks to me like they're going to go through and play. Well, they're going to play in the knockout phase. All of a sudden, you're going to feel quite stretched there if you don't have appropriate cover. Also, Robertson, probably an underrated progressive passer from the back line. So last season, when Liverpool would go from a back 4 into a back 3, and Robertson would play just to the left of Van Dijk, his progressive passing was underrated. I'd say it was slept on a little bit. So maybe it does help a little bit, but it's still a transfer that technically makes no sense to me whatsoever, because I just never thought for a second that Andy Robertson at this stage of his career would be swapping Liverpool for Spurs in the situation that these 2 clubs are in.
I was listening to Arne Slot, though. This was interesting in his pre-match news conference ahead of the Champions League game against Qarabag, and he was asked the question, can you definitively say that Andrew Robertson is staying? He stopped short of that. He said he expects Andrew Robertson to stay beyond the end of this transfer window. Look, I could be putting 2 and 2 together and not getting 4, but I'm getting a feeling that there still might be a little twist in this saga. What do you think?
I mean, presumably, Robertson has signalled the intent to make this move. Otherwise, this would have been dead in the water from the start.
100%.
So the players' assent is there. It all depends on whether Liverpool, surely, can coax Tsimikas back. So it depends on if Roma can find a backup replacement. So again, it's back to that chain that you mentioned. This is, and we're going to talk about some Aston Villa transfers in a minute that also involve chains. And this late in the window, these chains become the enemy, and it becomes so difficult to solve everybody's needs. So I'm still considering it a bit of a long shot here. I appreciate what you're saying, but it looks like a lot of work for a lot of different people with not a lot of time to go.
True. Let's keep an eye on that one anyway. Okay, as promised, let's talk Aston Villa. And there are not one, but two players returning to Villa Park. They've moved on. They decided, no, we love this club so much, we want to come back. Firstly, Tammy Abraham. We have been talking about him for a while. This looked like it was on the cards. Besiktas have allowed him to go on a permanent deal to Aston Villa worth around £18.2 million. We know about all the financial restraints that Aston Villa are under just now, but have they got a good deal here?
I think so. Yeah, you look at the price of a lot of these strikers that's floating around, and even just take Mateta, who we'll speak about later on in the podcast, and take a look at the prices that have been mentioned for Jørgen Strand Larsen. They're big prices, right? It's £35 million and plus. And over the summer, all those players transferring for £50 million plus between Premier League deals. So between Premier League clubs, sorry. So Tammy Abraham for about £18 million. And from what I can tell, he's also taken a bit of a wage cut to return to the Premier League and return to a club that he really wants to play for. The total cost of this deal doesn't look particularly high. And then you factor in the fact that Donyell Malen has been moved on to Roma. And when Roma take up that clause, Villa are going to make a transfer profit on this swap. So they swapped out a player who, as I've discussed on this pod before, doesn't technically fit Unai Emery's system in any particular position, albeit he is a good player, for a player that I think perfectly suits the Emery style and system. And they've made money on it, which is exactly what they have to do under the terms of the UEFA settlement agreement. They have to make a transfer profit. So they've done it, and they've done it, I think, by making the team better. This is good work.
We should also give props to Besiktas here, because they took Tammy Abraham on loan from Roma with a conditional obligation. Those conditions were met, so they made Tammy Abraham a permanent Besiktas player for around £11 million.
They paid €2 million loan fee as well, so it's a £13 million
outlay. Outlay, and they've made a profit. Which... Fair play to them.
Fair play. I mean, in the space of a day, they turned about €8 million of profit. Not bad, huh?
Well, I mean, given what you said as well about how good a deal it is for Villa, this looks like everyone's come out looking pretty good.
I would say so, yeah. I mean, maybe you could argue that if there is a loser in this deal, it's the fact that Roma had already agreed to this deal to loan him to Besiktas for the option, and that clearly that price is low, because Besiktas have immediately flipped in for €8 million more. So, I mean, Roma have been hard done by a little bit, I guess, but it's a funny little triangle, isn't it, between the three clubs, because Roma obviously took Malen off Villa.
You mentioned it just before there, Sam, about Tammy Abraham fitting into the system that Unai Emery has. It looks from the outset that he will be someone who can help out, first of all, on the bench when Ollie Watkins is off form or getting tired. In comes Tammy Abraham. Or are we underselling him a little bit? And is it going to be a case now that Ollie Watkins is thinking, right, I've got proper competition here, and there is a case that maybe before the end of the season we could see Tammy Abraham starting ahead of Ollie Watkins?
Yep, I think you're underselling him. I think it's the latter. Look, Abraham's a really good player. He hasn't played in England for a long time, so I think a lot of people will have just sort of forgotten how good he is at holding the ball up, how good he is at linking play, how strong he can be, and that combination of size and speed as well is really important. He has had a bad knee injury a couple of years ago, which freaked a few people out, but it's been a couple of years since he's had anything serious. He was good at Milan last season on loan without being spectacular. I think Tammy's going to give Watkins a real push here, and you know, Watkins has got some reasonable numbers in front of goal this year, but his overall performances and his decision-making in the final third this season has left a lot to be desired at points. Even against Newcastle at the weekend, in what was a brilliant 2-0 win, in which Watkins scored late on. A number of openings on the counter that Watkins unfortunately just got a little bit wrong. It's been quite frustrating to watch. So if Tammy can get those bits right, even without scoring, there's going to be a difficult conversation coming very soon.
Right. Another player who is coming back to Aston Villa, of course, is Douglas Luiz. We were talking just before there about a deal that was great for Besiktas, that was great for Aston Villa, that was great for Tammy Abraham, and maybe not for Roma. This one looks like a great deal for Aston Villa, a great deal for Douglas Luiz. Not great if you're Juventus, because they outlaid quite a bit of money for him, sent him out on loan, barely played for them, and now he's on his way back to Aston Villa. From an Aston Villa perspective, is this good news?
Well, it's ideal, really, because, first of all, so summer of 2024, Villa sold Douglas Luiz. He was a pivotal player for them, but someone had to go for PSR reasons. It could have been any one of about 5 really big players for the club, and it ended up being Douglas Luiz. He was the one that seemed reasonably happy to try something else. And when Juventus come calling, why not? And 50 million euros the deal was, and it just did not work. He was injured. He gave away a couple of penalties early on and just never really got going. Then he's loaned to Forest this season. He hasn't been great at Forest. Sean Dyche appeared to be taking some pretty not so veiled shots at him after the FA Cup game. He took him off at half-time and wasn't happy with his performance. So 18 months in the cold and the rust for Douglas Luiz, which means maybe we'd be silly to expect him to just hit the ground running for Villa. But he steps into the exact same system, the same manager, a lot of the same players. He'll be receiving passes from Emi Martinez, Ezri Konsa and Matty Cash. He'll be turning upfield and passing it on to Leon Bailey. It's just all the same people.
Leon Bailey, yeah, he's back as well.
He's back from Roma. So basically, give him a couple of weeks maybe, but in light of these injuries that Villa have suffered in central midfield, make no mistake, they lost their best player for the season in Boubacar Kamara to a season-ending knee injury. Then John McGinn got done and he's out for 6 weeks. And then the following week, Yuri Tielemans turns his ankle and he's out for between 6 and 8 weeks. In the space of 14 days, they've lost 3 huge players and they all play in midfield. Something had to happen. And the fact that they've managed to get Luiz done in basically about 48 hours here is magnificent work. Of course, it helps when the player himself is desperate to return. So you talked about the players coming back and loving Villa. Make no mistake, listen to Tammy Abraham talking about Villa. He said that if he came back to England, it would be for a special club, and that was Villa. He says he's been watching most of Villa's games since he left. That was 6 years ago. He's been watching Villa for 6 years. Maybe. We'll see. Douglas Luiz streams on Twitch a lot, and he's constantly talking about how he misses Villa. It was his best period of his life. He misses Villa Park. He misses the fans. He says, I love Aston Villa a lot. These players want to come back. So it can't be a poor situation for Villa in their time of need to be able to turn to guys like this who are seriously revved up to make a difference.
Just picking up on that, time of need. You've mentioned Kamara, you've mentioned McGinn, you've mentioned Tielemans. So from the outset, it looks like, right, we need to bring Douglas Luiz back because of all these injuries. But looking longer term, because there is an option to make that deal permanent, once everyone is fit again, and we probably won't see that everyone being fit until the start of next season, does Douglas Luiz still have a big role to play at Aston Villa longer term?
If he can pick up where he left off, absolutely, because I remain firmly of the belief that no one would ever want to sell Douglas Luiz in the first place. It just had to be for financial reasons. So if you've managed to get a player back like that, and the option reportedly, according to David Ornstein, is in the region of 25 million euros, I think. So not bad, really. 21 million pounds. If he does play well and Villa do get into the Champions League, it's possibly on the cards. Ross Barkley's contract will expire at the end of the season, which will open up a gap in midfield. And if you can go into a Champions League campaign with Tielemans and Douglas Luiz rotating as the creative player in the midfield, and Kamara and Onana as your more enforcer-style options, that's a stacked midfield. That's really good, as long as Douglas Luiz looks like his old self. So let's see what he puts on the table. I think it's completely open for him.
Tammy or Douglas Luiz, which one are you more excited about?
That is a difficult question to answer because initially the answer was Abraham, because goal scorers, forwards, they tend to be more exciting, don't they? However, maybe say, okay, let's put it this way. Abraham, the most exciting signing. The pure relief to get Douglas Luiz through the door. In light of the Tielemans injury, off the back of the McGinn and Camara problems, that's relief. That's not excitement. That's just cold, hard relief.
Cold, hard relief. Fantastic stuff. That's it for part one. Join us after this very short break as we round up the rest of the news and analysis as the transfer window begins to creak shut. It doesn't slam shut in January, does it? It just creaks a little bit because of the difficulty of being able to do deals.
You know what it's like trying to open a door in the cold, all the hinges shift around. Yeah, I know what you mean. I think it could slam shut if there's a load of stuff going on the final day.
Yeah.
I think we can leave ourselves open to the idea of it slamming shut in that instance.
Okay, see you after the break. Welcome back to part two of the Transfer Talk podcast. Still here, the legend. I don't know who writes this. You've written this, haven't you? That is ESPN Sam Tighe. Right. Potential for some transfer dominoes. There's a transfer cliche for you.
Yeah.
It's taken us quite long to get there. Transfer dominoes in the last few days of the window involving Nottingham Forest, Leeds, Crystal Palace and Wolves. Bear with me.
Here we go.
Forest in for Jean-Philippe Mateta from Palace. Palace want to replace him with Wolves' Jørgen Strand Larsen, who Leeds are also in for. Now, Sam, when I saw this story about Forest and Mateta, I was like, right, that is interesting. Because it's fair to say that relations between the clubs probably aren't the best.
Nope.
Given what happened in the summer when Forest replaced Palace in the Europa League. Could you see that relationship impacting any kind of deal on Mateta, or is it just going to be cold hard cash?
I mean, you've got to put business first here, and ultimately, as much as they're not going to like each other very much, although, I was going to say maybe it's more on the fan side. No, definitely there will be animosity at the club level too. There just has to be based on what happened. But Mateta has backed himself into a little bit of a corner, I would argue here. He's expressed his intent to leave. He has not handed in a transfer request, but he's done everything but. That seemed to be off the back of some Juventus interest. They were sniffing around last week off the back of some Aston Villa interest when the Tammy Abraham negotiations were looking quite tough. But Juventus quickly moved on to Yusuf En-Nesyri, who they actually haven't done a deal for yet, but we'll see. And Villa signed Tammy Abraham. So Mateta is probably looking at Forest here and thinking, please? Please? Because he's made his stance very, very clear. Off the back of Mark Gay leaving and Glasner's announcement to leave at the end of the season, Mateta wanted to go. And he's probably just praying and hoping that Forest can come and stump up the cash that's required. Because Palace appear to have set a price. And if you've got a want-away player, I would always recommend you sell. Because it never works out if you keep someone against their will. They just don't play as well. So hopefully the relations or lack of relations between the clubs doesn't stymie this one, because Mateta, I think, needs to get out of there.
Yeah, and it should also be noted with the league table, they're pretty close to each other as well. And even though people are thinking, oh no, Palace aren't in a relegation fight, well, if they continue with that form, you just never know. You mentioned the price there. We think Palace want around 40 million for Mateta. We think Wolves run around 40 million for Strand Larsen. So very similar valuations. But in terms of what they would bring on the pitch, are Mateta and Larsen similar in terms of what they're going to do and output-wise?
I think so. Yeah, I think it's a pretty good match. And, but we've talked about it already, but you often don't have that many options available to you with only 5 days to go in the window. So to be able to pick someone up like Jørgen Strand Larsen, should Mateta leave, would be great, I think. He's younger. He's a similar profile in that he's a big, strong, leading number 9 who can play back to goal, can take a long ball in, feed it wide and move, which is exactly what Mateta does for his nippy wingers and number 10s. And he's a presence in the box. All right, he hasn't scored many goals this season. It's been difficult for him. But last year he scored 14 in the Premier League. I think we've got an idea of his calibre. So I think Palace would come out of this looking pretty good if they said goodbye to an obviously want-away striker and picked up someone, I think, who could become as good as Mateta, 3 or 4 years younger, for a similar fee, actually wants to play for them. That would help.
Forest have actually completed a deal for a striker already, haven't they? Napoli's Lorenzo Luca. That's on loan with an option to buy. You're smirking there. Well, what can you tell us about him, and how does he fit in, especially if they still go for Jean-Philippe Mateta?
Yeah, right. Luca, who in my mind is basically the Italian Chris Wood. Like, he's a huge target man striker who is brilliant with his head. It's an obvious stylistic Chris Wood replacement, and there are genuine concerns over like how much of a part Chris Wood can play for the rest of this season. It might be that we don't see him at all. He's had terrible injury troubles over the course of this campaign. It's been a real shame given what he achieved last year. So in that sense, it makes perfect sense. A little thing on Luca, I don't know if you know. He last year for Udinese, he tried to take a penalty. He was not supposed to take a penalty. So Udinese were rewarded one, and Florian Thauvin tried to pick up the ball and take it because he was the nominated taker. Luca took the ball, refused to give it to anyone, had a massive argument with Jakob Biol, who now plays for Leeds, had a massive argument with his manager, basically just bullied everyone out of the way, put the ball down, smashed it into the top corner, one of the best penalties you will ever see after like a 4-minute argument with 3 of his teammates, and then the manager subbed him off.
Brilliant.
35 minutes into the game. Fantastic. Oh, of course, he's broken rank, hasn't he? He's not respected the order. At least he put the penalty away. Yeah. Thank goodness for that.
I thought that story was going to end. Oh, no. He did a Panenka and it went straight into the hands.
It was a fantastic penalty. So this boy, he can finish under pressure for sure. I mean, he put himself under all that pressure, but great stuff. Forest seemingly have this obsession with buying as many forwards as possible. It's like they're trying to create an army of strikers. But there's always question marks over Awoniyi's fitness. Wood might not play again. Callum Wendo's now gone out on loan. I guess if you really look at it, they do need the numbers. They're still in Europe. They're probably going to end up in the playoff. That's 2 extra games in February. But generally speaking, their attitude towards just loading up on forwards, 5 wingers over the summer, it does confuse me a bit. I don't know what the long-term play is.
We discussed a few weeks ago about the possibility of Lucas Paqueta leaving West Ham. He still hasn't gone yet as we record this, but it looks like he is going to make that move from the London Stadium to Flamengo, where he wants to go. £35.8 million this deal is worth. We knew he wanted to go. Props to West Ham here that with, still a few days left in the window, they've managed to get, it looks like they're managing to get this one over the line.
I think well done to them. Yes, it's a very strong fee. I appreciate he's an excellent player, and
let me stop you there though. You say a strong fee. Will there be a tinge of regret because not too long ago we were talking about 60 to 70 million pounds for him to City, weren't we?
The real Paqueta, the one that we knew a couple of years ago, before all of the off-field issues have caught up with him and effectively crushed his spirit. That was a 60 million player. That was a player that seemed like he was on the verge of joining Manchester City, and it could not have gone worse for him over the last couple of years. So this is a move that he needs. It's the one that he feels comfortable with. I think with 18 months left on his deal, and because of the betting allegations that have been cleared, but naturally mark him and follow him round, I'm guessing that no one else in the Premier League was particularly interested in him. So that should really remove your ability to get a £50 million fee. Okay, so where else can you go? Generally, if you sell abroad, elsewhere, the fee goes down. So to get that much money from Brazil, that's pretty good. I mean, Flamengo are loaded, but still, I think in the context, in the situation, it's a really strong fee, and I'm happy. I'm happy to see him go for his sake.
Okay. They've also confirmed, have West Ham, that midfielder Guido Rodriguez has joined Valencia. That's on a permanent transfer, and the classic U-turn or 180 or. Can't think of any other phrases that would be similar to that with James Ward-Prowse, because we reported earlier on in the month Burnley were in talks with West Ham United over a season, a loan until the end of the season. Then they decided we're not going to pursue that deal. James Ward-Prowse appears on the bench for West Ham United against Sunderland in that 3-1 win, an unused substitute, admittedly.
Yeah.
And then 24 to 48 hours later, when we think, actually, he might be part of Nuno's plans, bang, it's gone the other way again. Burnley back in talks. As we record this right now, he's having a medical with Burnley. So it looks like this one is going to happen sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
Just generally on that, and I think you might have touched on this last week, given the amount of times we have been speaking about the Premier League this season in particular, a load of teams relying on set pieces.
Yeah.
To allow somebody like a set piece specialist, and we are talking the specialist of specialists in James Ward-Prowse. This is purely a Nuno and Ward-Prowse issue, isn't it?
I don't think there's a person on earth who rates James Ward-Prowse worse than Nuno. I mean, sorry, but you look at the trail of evidence. I mean, bear in mind these two have come into contact before at Nottingham Forest.
Yeah.
Ward-Prowse was loaned in at Forest when Nuno was there. He took a quick look at him and decided, you're not for me, and sent him back to West Ham as soon as the January window opened. So there's your first clue. I'd imagine that Ward-Prowse's face when Nuno took the West Ham job was not a pretty one. And at the time, so it was quite early in the season, Ward-Prowse had played quite a lot of games for West Ham. He was in the squad, he was playing, he was starting the majority of matches. Nuno was appointed. We have not seen him since.
Yep.
Not a minute, barely a squad.
Yeah.
So if there was anybody that needed a move this January, apart from Raheem Sterling, it was James Ward-Prowse. Nuno is not interested in using James Ward-Prowse. Now, as a set-piece specialist, yeah, it is quite ironic that he's been sidelined in the age of the set-piece. Very strange indeed. And Burnley, clearly, I mean, look, they're pretty far off safety, but they're giving it a go. And why not? Why not turn to him and be like, let's see if we can set piece our way to safety? Like, the marginal gains are there. Can you stick 3 in from outside the box and beat David Beckham's record? And can you send in a couple of killer corners and scratch us out some results? You never know. And it'd be good to see him play again.
Yeah, you mentioned Sterling there. We'll come back to Sterling later on in the show, but just sticking with West Ham, one player that has come in is Adama Traore. Now, if you're talking about relationships between player and manager with James Ward-Prowse and Nuno not working, this is a case of completely the opposite. Yeah. Is this a good move for everyone, this one?
I mean, yeah, sure. Adama Traore basically never plays at Fulham. And Fulham, they're trying to work in fresh blood, I think, by the look. They're trying to get younger, and they're trying to find ways to evolve that squad, and Adama Traore is not part of that. This is the third time that Adama will link up, I think, with Nuno. So certainly turning to what he knows. And the pattern I've generally observed in football is that managers under pressure, they tend to lean and turn to those players that they trust and they know, because they can guarantee something out of them. And Nuno clearly likes Adama Traore, so he's bought him again. I mean, why not? £2 million.
Yeah, it seems like a deal that makes a lot of sense, that one. Now, if Fulham now losing Adama Traore, but lots of talk that the deal for Oscar Bobb from Manchester City is very, very close to being agreed. How will Fulham view all of that? Will they say, this is good news, this is an upgrade for us?
I think, out with the old, in with the new, I guess. And Oscar Bobb, someone that I really like. I think we talked about him last week. Very unlucky. Should never have gone to training that day, just before the season started last season. Unfortunately broke his leg and it's been wiped ever since. Just hasn't got a footing, and this is a very good young player. I've spoken before about how Fulham feel like they have a more experienced and older squad, and there could be some room for refreshment. Josh King, the academy product, is one of those, but Oscar Bobb would be a welcome addition as well. And Fulham, I think, just need to spruce up a little bit in that area and start future-proofing. Williams gone, Adama Traore goes. You can still have your older heads in there, but Tom Kearney's mid-30s now. It's time to start changing the face of that squad. And they're in a position here where, I don't want it to sound disrespectful to Fulham, because clearly they're very safe from relegation. I mean, that's to put it lightly. They are 3 or 4 points off the Champions League race right now. So to say they're safe is putting it lightly, but they're in a position where they can afford to go ahead and look at those players and look at that evolution of the squad, knowing full well that they're not going to get dragged downwards. So it's the perfect spot, I think, to spend a bit of money.
Another player that they're interested in is Ricardo Pepi from PSV Eindhoven.
Yeah.
They've made a bid worth £28 million. They have got a long-term interest in this player, because I recall this time last year they made a bid of around £21 million, which was rejected by PSV. PSV want to bring in a replacement before they allow Pepi to go. What can you tell us about Pepi?
He's got a broken arm right now, so he's injured.
Yes.
He's out for probably another 6 weeks. Again, doesn't this just tell you how secure Fulham feel? The deals they're trying to do. They're like, we really like this striker. He has a broken arm. That's fine. We don't need him till March anyway. We're all good. So clearly they like him. The long-standing interest makes sense, and they're not perturbed by the fact that he has a broken arm, which he did, by the way, scoring a goal. Proper striker. Oh, what a nose for a goal. Broke his arm while sliding in to score in a 5-1 win. Well done. He scores really scruffy goals, a proper nose for a spot in the box, like a bit of an Ollie Watkins style. Knows where the ball's going to land, knows where he needs to be. His all-round play probably might need a little bit of work, I'd say. Just watching the games for PSV, especially in the Champions League, maybe some work on the close control or the first touch, just that all-round play. But he's young, and he has the instinct, so he's worth working on.
So, Sam, before we go, just a few other players and deals I want to discuss. We mentioned him in passing before, Raheem Sterling. Now, I think everyone wants a resolution to this. Chelsea and, of course, Sterling himself. 18 months left on his contract. We understand he's on over £300,000 a week. It looks like it might be heading towards a mutual termination, which is going to cost Chelsea quite a bit of money. But I think it just needs to end sooner rather than later.
But surely less money than it would if you just saw out his contract, presumably. That's
Yes.
why it's mutual. So probably makes sense to do it.
Yes. Where do you place him, though?
Place him in what respect? With
Which
clubs?
team? Yeah. Where does he fit?
No idea. Like, haven't seen him play for ages. I don't know what his level is. It's impossible to say, and that's why this mutual termination needs to happen, because at a reported £325,000 a week, he's too expensive to gamble on for anybody looking to take him on loan, pay a portion of his wages. You know, Arsenal I thought made a relatively smart move last season to have a look at him for about 50% wage coverage. That and even that turned out to be, it didn't work, but I think it was worth having a look. So even at 50% wage coverage, most Premier League clubs cannot afford that. Would out-earn anybody else at that club. It's too expensive to do, and Chelsea aren't going to sit there and go, well, you can have him for 20%, because it doesn't help them. It doesn't help them at all. So look, this is not me baying for Raheem Sterling to give up wages. He signed a contract. Chelsea promised it. He's owed the money. But if he wants to come to a mutual termination, just knock a few million off that deal, become a free agent, the phone will blow up. It will just blow up. And he won't have to sit there and deal with Chelsea negotiating a percentage. He can just strike his own deal as he likes to, which is what needs to happen.
Yeah, okay, let's look at a couple of other deals. Bournemouth, they've been very busy. They've agreed a deal worth up to £17.3 million with Lazio for the goalkeeper, Christos Mandas. That's on loan with an option to buy as well. What did you make of it when they went for a keeper, given that they spent £25 million on Jordi Petrovic in the summer? Because this, as far as we are aware, is not just to back up Petrovic. This is to compete for that number one spot.
I mean, the sad reality here is that Petrovic has not had a good season, from my perspective. And I think Bournemouth have been particularly fragile from range. They're conceding a lot of long-range shots. And Petrovic's shot-stopping statistics are not looking good. In terms of like a goal-prevented metric, he's bottom of the league this season. And again, against Liverpool, I don't think he covered himself in glory. So I really don't blame Bournemouth for looking at other options here. That's not to put a fork in Petrovic's Bournemouth career completely, because he's only 6 months in and he's still a young goalkeeper. But it hasn't been great. And they're in that cluster of clubs just down the bottom there that you've already mentioned, with Palace and with West Ham, where they are going to be looking down a little bit. No matter how unrealistic it feels, you know, you're going to be living in the moment and you're going to be worried. So this looks like quite a friendly deal, a loan with an option. Why not? Let's have a look. And Mandas is really good with the ball at his feet, a really good passer. Plays for Greece. I watched him save a penalty for Greece in the last couple of internationals. He looks like a good goalkeeper, but this is quite a low risk move, and I really don't blame them for looking elsewhere than Petrovic, because I have not been impressed.
We did think that looking into the window from December onwards, we knew that there was the situation with Antoine Semenyo, and Bournemouth were pretty canny with what they did there. Yes, they might have been able to get a lot more money for Semenyo, more than the release clause.
Yeah, I don't know, but yeah.
But they might have been able to, but they said, right, this is going to be the release clause, but we're putting a date on it. You've got to complete this deal by the middle of January, simply because we don't want to be caught short. And so it's proved. they've got the money for Semenyo, and they've gone straight back into the market, and Rayan has joined for £24.7 million. That could rise to £30 million depending on how he does. We've talked a lot on this podcast about the business that Bournemouth do and the good business that they do. We shouldn't be that surprised that they've gone out and spent in January, should we? You mentioned that, where they are in the table, they're in that, are we looking up? Are we looking over our shoulder? Once Semenyo went, it wasn't going to be a case of, let's just see what's around and then go in the summer. They had to bring someone in now, didn't they?
I think so, yeah. Just on the Semenyo fee point, because I interrupted you, my point there is that if you look at all of the Premier League forwards that moved clubs last summer between Premier League clubs, so the list is right here. We'll take Isak out of it, who cost an awful lot. In Burmo, 65 million, rising to 71. Cunha, 62.5. Eza, 60. All of these players are 25, 26 years of age, and they're all in that bracket. Semenyo, 26, 62.5 million. It's bang on. It is absolutely bang on. So if you use the market and you use benchmarking from Burmo and Cunha and even Eza, this is the right price, which is why I think ultimately, Bournemouth have obviously put that release clause into his contract last summer when he signed that new deal. They've benchmarked against Cunha and Burmo just like everybody else has. All right, you might have added another 5 million for a January desperation, but generally this is on. They've not been shortchanged in any way. And then Rayan looks really exciting. He's the kind of player who ultimately probably should not have been available to Bournemouth. However, because all of the Premier League big dogs spent all their money on each other's players over the summer, they've all run out of money. So Bournemouth are like, sweet, let's go and take a 19-year-old Brazilian wide forward who will probably end up he has the physical tools to end up as a striker, and a really good one. Let's go and take him for 25 million, rising to 30. Big thing here, no sell-on clause, no percentage of future fee owed to Vasco da Gama, which is surprising because usually Brazilians know what they've got. But to be fair, Vasco have had some terrible financial trouble recently, so even 25 million is a huge windfall. And they've stuck a 100 million euro release clause in his contract because they know what they're doing and they know what they've got. They've got a really talented player here. And while everybody else is wiped out financially, Bournemouth have gone, he looks good. Let's bring him in. It's the next big sale.
Just finally, Sam, Wolves. This has really caught me by surprise, this one. Wolves in talks with Marseille over a straight loan deal for Angel Gomez. Now, former Manchester United midfielder, former Lille midfielder, and, of course, 4 caps for England. Now, when he was winning those caps, people were saying, hello.
Yeah.
That we've got a player in this
Lee
position.
Carsley era.
Exactly.
Hell yeah.
Exactly. We've got a player here that looks like he could be in the long-term plans for England in major tournaments as well. Now we're talking about a loan move to the bottom club in the Premier League. Are you surprised? And what can Wolves expect from today's Angel Gomez?
Yeah, I'm very surprised by this, but I'll asterisk it by saying that I haven't watched a lot of Marseille this season, so I don't know the ins and outs of his performances. But he has made 12 starts in the league, so he can't be that bad. And we know him as a player anyway, because we saw him playing for Lille. He was very good. Coming into the summer, he was a prized free agent. Coming up to that deadline, he was one of the names in everyone's top 10 list. Who could be on the move? Who's a free transfer? Angel Gomez was right there. And we saw him play for England. We saw how smooth and fluid he was on the ball. And he goes to play for De Zerbi. De Zerbi, the master of putting your studs on the ball and keeping 70% of it. How this has ended up with a straight loan to Wolves, who look effectively doomed, I have no idea. Absolutely no idea how this has happened. But good player. So well done, Wolves.
It is, yeah. And I'll be very interested to see how he gets on, because Wolves are showing signs of a bit of a resurgence. Probably not enough to pull off one of the greatest escape in Premier League history.
It absolutely would.
But if he can perform in a team that is resurging, then come the summer, he's going to put himself in a good position, isn't he?
Yeah, and look, from his perspective, I don't know what's gone wrong for him at Marseille, but he's been in the England squad in the last couple of years, and he'll have his eye on it. And we look at the players like this. I don't think Thomas Tuchel has called him up, or if he has, my apologies, but it's been fleeting. You'd think that their chances of getting into that squad are 5%, and that making a move like this is is not going to work. But these players back themselves and they do everything they possibly can to try and get their nose in. And it's another name that's been mentioned this window, Ruben Loftus-Cheek. Started 8 games for Milan this season. Looks like he could be expendable. He made a squad in September. Admittedly, he was surprised to do so, but he made a Thomas Tuchel England squad. These players in this position, right on the fringes, they're always thinking, "What if? What if I could just do this? If I could just do that?" Yeah. You never know. What if Adam Wharton or Elliot Anderson got injured? And a lot of the January window before the World Cup, a lot of the moves are driven by this kind of stuff, and we might see it as a bit of a pipe dream, but you never know.
And you never know. That could mean a very busy final few days of this transfer window. We certainly hope so. Do you know what? After that episode, Sam, I have just been racking my brains, and now I have decided that it is, in fact, in third place, colleague.
Oh, there you go.
And joint first, friend and legend.
Friend and legend. That's brilliant.
Sam, it's been an absolute pleasure. The next time I will see you, the window will be closed and we will be reflecting on what has been a very interesting, I feel, January transfer window. Thanks for your time.
Nice one. I can't wait. I'll spend Monday night watching you on the telly, and then I'll see you on the Tuesday. Bags under your eyes, I assume. No sleep, caffeinated. You're a workhorse, aren't you?
Yeah, mine's a coconut latte.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And thank you to all you guys and girls who have been listening. And wherever you've been listening, in your cars or on the train, in the wind or in the rain, in your house or in the shed, on your couch or in your bed, on the hills or in the valleys, in the streets or in the alleys, out for a run or maybe a walk. Thanks for listening to Transfer Talk.
And that's for sure.